format that lets creators share their message and connect with their audience in new ways. Podcast creators get special video and playlist badges and are eligible for official search cards and to be featured on youtube.com/podcasts. In this video, we'll walk you through how to create a podcast in YouTube Studio, how to analyze your podcast performance, and some best practices for podcasting on YouTube. Let's dive in. First, let's walk through how to create a podcast in YouTube Studio. On YouTube, a podcast is a playlist, and podcast episodes are videos in that playlist. To create a new podcast, go to YouTube Studio and click Create, then New Podcast. Then enter in the details for your podcast, including a podcast title, podcast description, visibility, and a podcast thumbnail. Note, this thumbnail will need to be square. Hit Create to save. Once you have a podcast playlist created, you'll be able to add new or existing videos to it. You can add a new video to a podcast during the upload flow at the Details step by selecting the podcast playlist you want to add it to. You can add existing videos to a podcast playlist by going to the Content tab, selecting one or multiple videos you want to add, then select Add to Playlist. Now, let's walk through how to set an existing playlist as a podcast. Go to YouTube Studio, then Content, then Playlists. Find the playlist you want to set as a podcast, then click the three-dot menu and select Set as Podcast. Here, you'll need to review the title, description, and visibility for your podcast. You'll also need to add a square podcast thumbnail, which is a unique requirement for podcasts. In YouTube Studio, you can see all your podcasts by going to Content, then the Podcast tab. Here you can edit your podcast details at any time, including default video order. If your podcast is episodic, consider ordering your videos from newest to oldest. If your podcast is serial, you might consider ordering your playlist from oldest to newest. To manually sort your videos, you can drag and drop your videos on the playlist page on YouTube. Podcast playlists are eligible for podcast features on YouTube, such as podcast badges, official search cards, and to be featured on youtube.com/podcasts. Podcasts will also be available in the YouTube Music app. Now, let's walk through how to analyze your podcast performance. In YouTube Studio Analytics, the Overview tab will give you a snapshot of your podcast's performance. Here, you can see your podcast views and watch time. For a deep dive into a specific podcast's performance, click See Podcast Analytics. If you have multiple podcasts, click the title of the podcast you'd like to analyze. You can also get here from the Content tab in Studio by going to Podcasts, then clicking into Analytics for the specific podcast you want to analyze. On the Overview tab, you'll find aggregated metrics such as views, watch time, and estimated revenue for all videos in the podcast playlist in the selected time range, as well as your top performing episodes. The Content tab will show you key moments for audience retention and how viewers find your podcast videos. The Audience tab will show audience demographics. And if you're monetizing, the Revenue tab will show your estimated revenue and top earning content. Finally, let's walk through some best practices for podcast creators. Create a public podcast playlist for each podcast on your channel. This playlist should only contain full-length episodes from all seasons of a show in the order they should be consumed. This helps fans of your podcast find all the episodes in one place. Next, use the same name of your podcast as your playlist title. Don't add extra words, not even